In the latest episode of The Curse of Oak Island Season 12, the Lagena brothers discovered evidence that might finally prove there is a Viking connection to Oak Island. They discovered evidence that might have left their mark on the island, suggesting that Vikings, who supposedly appeared in a region nearby, might have actually left their mark on this island. In Newfoundland, Canada, Marty Lagina and his team searched over 600 miles to find Lansos Meadows, the only confirmed Viking settlement in North America. This site, discovered in 1960 by Norwegian explorer Helge Ingstad and his archaeologist wife Anne Stein Ingstad, is proof that the Norse were on this side of the Atlantic around the year 1000, long before Columbus supposedly discovered the New World. Spanning 31 square miles, Lansos Meadows has revealed 8 structures, including what seems to be a forge. The settlement has yielded over 800 artifacts so far, from everyday tools to remnants of ancient Norse craftsmanship. According to sagas, the Old Norse tales came from Greenland, and they were there to explore this new territory for resources. Marty and his team, along with archaeologist Laird Niven and metallurgist Emma Culligan, explored further into this Viking mystery, believing that the Vikings might have made it even further south, possibly to Oak Island. During their travels across Europe, the team uncovered clues that suggested Norse descendants may have worked with the Knights Templar, the legendary protectors of priceless religious treasures. At several locations, they found symbols and artifacts strikingly similar to those uncovered on Oak Island over the past 2 centuries. Back at Lansos Meadows, experts like Loretta Decker from Parks Canada suggest that the settlement was more like a base camp for resource extraction and regrouping, comparing it to setting up camp on the moon. The sagas mention a summer settlement called Hop, south of Newfoundland, which could be in Nova Scotia or even on Oak Island. This is not far from the truth, as butternut seeds were discovered nearby in the Lansos Meadows region, suggesting that the Vikings went much further south than Newfoundland. The nearest place they could have come from is the Nova Scotia-New Brunswick area, suggesting they were on the move. If the Vikings made it to Nova Scotia, it is possible they reached Oak Island. The connections between the Vikings and the Pope are too strong to ignore. The traditional narrative about European arrival in North America is disrupted by the idea that Vikings could have explored and possibly influenced regions like Oak Island. Additionally, the ongoing mystery of Oak Island itself remains incomplete. Marty suggests that if the Vikings traveled as far south as Nova Scotia, there is every reason to believe they could have reached Oak Island. If they were moving down the Atlantic coast, stopping at places rich in resources, Oak Island might have been a perfect spot for a pit stop or more significant settlement. The question is not just whether they visited, but what they might have left behind. Doug introduces a fascinating tidbit that changes the whole narrative. The sagas mention Norse interactions with the Pope. The Norse were known to interact with European powers, and the Catholic Church, with its influence and reach, often played a central role in exploration and land claims. If the Pope and the Norse had a connection, it is not unreasonable to think the Vikings could have been part of a larger operation involving the Knights Templar. On Oak Island, traces of European activity dating back to the 13th century make the timeline more cohesive. Many of the sagas and records from this time are tied to the Catholic Church, which was not just a spiritual power, but also deeply political, and had a vested interest in expanding its influence westward. If the Norse were working under or alongside the Church, their travels to places like Newfoundland, Nova Scotia, or even Oak Island could have been part of a larger plan. The team at Lansos Meadows is exploring the possibility of connecting medieval Vikings to Oak Island, a North American mystery. They met Ragnar, a blacksmith trained in Viking-era techniques, who provided technical expertise on tools and materials from the Viking Age. Mark, a metallurgist with 25 years of experience, helped frame the question at hand. Could the Vikings have left artifacts or signs on Oak Island? Doug introduced an artifact that was first uncovered during a dig back in 1965, but was only recently reacquired for further study. When shown to an archaeologist in Denmark, it was flagged as being very similar to Viking-era weaponry. This arrowhead, which was not just tools of war, but also a reflection of advanced craftsmanship, is a big deal. If this arrowhead really is of Viking origin, it is a big deal. Emma Culligan, the team's metallurgist, took a closer look at the arrowhead using an X-ray fluorescent spectrometer, which used radiation to analyze the composition of an object without damaging it, which is a perfect tool for fragile historical artifacts. Emma Culligan's analysis did not definitively confirm its origin, but it did add weight to the theory. It was one more piece of evidence that suggests a deeper, older history for Oak Island than we previously thought. The team also explored bog ore, a naturally occurring iron deposit that is basically a Viking hallmark. Mark explained how bog ore, a mix of ferrous oxide and sand, was commonly used in Europe for forging tools and weapons as far back as the 5th century BC. It is also found in swampy areas, which just so happens to include both Lanços Meadows and Oak Island. If the materials match, it could be the smoking gun that ties Viking activity directly to the island. The significance of this potential connection cannot be overstated. Viking blacksmithing techniques were highly advanced for their time. If the arrowhead or any other artifact found on Oak Island was made using bog ore, it would be a strong indicator of Norse involvement. Marty summed up the situation perfectly. Oak Island has become incredibly complex. With so many different theories, artifacts, and timelines, it is a puzzle with pieces that seem to come from entirely different boxes. But every discovery, like this arrowhead or the bog ore, helps eliminate some possibilities while opening the door to others. The Viking connection adds a layer of richness to the story. It intertwined exploration, craftsmanship, and the mystery of Oak Island in a way that feels almost too good to be true. Additionally, the possibility of a connection to the Knights Templar, who are often theorized to have used Oak Island as a secret repository for treasures and artifacts, is also intriguing. The Vikings were unrivaled navigators of their time, and their expertise in navigation and survival in harsh conditions could have made them invaluable allies. The artifacts found on Oak Island over the years make things even more interesting. The evidence of Viking presence in North America is a complex and multifaceted topic. Lanços Meadows is the only confirmed Viking settlement in the region. But other clues include butternut seeds found at the site, which suggests the Norse traveled much farther south than Newfoundland. This aligns with the sagas, which describe a place called Vinland, rich in resources. Other North American archaeological sites have discovered artifacts resembling Norse craftsmanship, such as the Main Penny, a silver coin from 11th century Norway, found in a Native American archaeological site in the 1950s. The Templar connection is another intriguing aspect of the Viking presence in North America. Historical records confirm the Templars were a powerful Catholic order during the Crusades, tasked with protecting pilgrims and managing vast wealth. However, there is no solid evidence tying them to North America, and the theory hinges on speculation and the mysterious disappearance of Templar treasures after their order was disbanded in the 14th century. If the Templars did come to Oak Island, what could they have left behind? Proponents argue that their treasure, possibly including the Holy Grail or the Ark of the Covenant, might have been hidden in the money pit. However, no definitive Templar artifacts have been unearthed on Oak Island, and the dates don't always align with their timeline of activity in Europe. The case for Viking involvement on Oak Island gains traction with each new find, such as an arrowhead analyzed by Emma Culligan and bog ore found both on Oak Island and at Lanços Meadows. If these materials can be matched through further analysis, it would strengthen the argument for a Norse connection. However, it is essential to approach these theories critically, as every tantalizing clue has a counterpoint to consider. The Templar connection relies heavily on circumstantial evidence and gaps in historical records, while the Viking theory, while supported by physical evidence, is still far from conclusive. Skeptics also argue that the artifacts found on Oak Island could have been brought there later by settlers or collectors, and that the lack of definitive Viking structures or settlements raises questions about the Norse presence.